Hello, everybody, and welcome into After the Game with Todd Leary, of course. Indiana taking on Northwestern tonight in Evanston, a game they desperately needed to win. Northwestern coming off of 9 straight losses. Man, oh man, it was close. Indiana pulls out a double overtime thriller, Todd Leary. I don't know how in the world we got to that point. We started out with a game of two teams that could not throw it in the ocean from the ocean, and it turned into a thriller.
Yeah, I mean, that's a game Indiana has to win. You just definitely cannot lose that game if you have any aspirations of postseason play. And so you got to look at it positively, like they came away with a win. Now that's as ugly a basketball in the first half as two teams could possibly play. Like it isn't like Northwestern was a world beaters. Like they were just as bad as Indiana. It was just an awful display of Division I basketball. But at the end of the day, I mean, Indiana had to go 5-3 in those last 8 games, and they've won the first 2 games of that. And so you have to feel great about the position that they're in right now.
And offensively, this is kind of an opposite of the last game. Last game had no output from the guards. It was horrible. This time, Al Durham, 24 points. Franklin with 23 points. Those guys carried this team tonight. Obviously, Al Durham hitting the shot tonight that would get Indiana over the hump. But they got to get that offense balanced inside and outside because they got very little to no production interior tonight from Trey Jackson-Davis. He ended up with 10 points on the night, but what didn't do much Thompson ended up with 7 points as well. We did see Jerome Hunter in there, but not a lot of production on the interior.
Yeah, there wasn't. I mean, this was a different type of game for Indiana. So you can look at that positively. I mean, you don't want to have to rely on Trace every single game and race every single game to have to win. So you can definitely look at that from a positive. And the funny part is I'm like helter skelter here on changing my lineups on who I want on the floor and all that at different times. But right now, like I have totally flip flopped. I think Indiana at one point I thought I wanted to see him with 4 guards. Now I think I want to see him with 2 guards. I mean, I want to see whatever they've got to do. This is going to sound so negative, and people probably have a right to think that this is a bad statement to make. But whatever Indiana has to do to get Rob Phinisee off the floor, that's the lineup I want to see, because he is absolutely as unproductive as an Indiana basketball player can be with the amount of minutes that he plays.
Yeah, he disappeared again.
This is 3 games in a row.
It can't. We can talk about confidence, but man, you're a junior. You're supposed to be a leader. You played for this team before. I can't speak to that, but you can. You got to step up. Gain your confidence however you need to, but you can't be a part of this team and not produce.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Indiana, built its history on, and you could get into the debate about blue blood or not blue blood anymore or whatever, but what they built their history on was the fact of, there was always somebody on the bench that was trying to take your spot. And quite honestly, I guess that's just not the case right now, because with the numbers that Rob Phinisee or that point guard position is putting out, there's no way he would ever see the floor again back in the 80s and 90s. And I'm not trying to compare it back to the 80s and 90s. I mean, we're in a different age of basketball, but man, that position has got to be more productive. I mean, you shouldn't be battling like this with that Northwestern team. That Northwestern team's terrible. They're awful.
And Trey Jackson-Davis, you can't really give him a pass. I mean, he's supposed to be an All-American. He's supposed to be your guy, one of the top players in the country. And too often, he just is not the guy for this team. And I know that there are different game plans. And he got double-teamed a ton tonight. They really loaded up on him. Got to pass out of that.
Yeah, well, and like I've said it all along. This is just my feelings of it. But Race Thompson's a much better all-around scorer, when you're throwing the ball to the interior than Trace is. Now, Trace has some exceptional athletic ability and strength with the vice grips with the basketball. He's a great 2-hand rebounder that's pretty rare. So I mean, Trace is overall a better player prospect, I would say, but more valuable to this team. Like Race to me is more valuable to this team. I mean, I think that overall you're looking at you're looking at the team that I think needs to develop. And I think a lot of people would look at it on paper and say, this Indiana team is going to go as Trace Jackson Davis goes. And I honestly look at it completely the opposite. Like, I think they need to kind of move in a different direction and start going more at a fast pace. Forget trying to throw it inside all the time, because Trace is not that great of a back to the basket interior player.
And we've talked about this before. He's young, but Christian Lander, he comes in. It seems like it speeds things up. The offense speeds up. It gives him more opportunities. I don't know how many times I watched him run the damn shot clock down to 6, 5, 4 seconds tonight. It's maddening. And Northwestern, they're trying to get down to get a good quick shot. If they don't, they back it out and run back around. But Indiana's killing itself with opportunities.
Yeah, but tonight's probably one of the first nights that Archie Miller would have a very strong argument in saying, Christian Lander made some really, really bad freshman mistakes today. Now, he made a couple of, ESPN top 10 passes in there, but he had some bad turnovers tonight. And there's an argument to be made for you couldn't have him in at the end of the game. But that doesn't mean Rob Finney has to come in. It doesn't mean someone who is that unproductive has to come in. Put Jerome Hunter in. Play with a different – put Leal in place of those guys. Rob Finney is not producing like a point guard needs to, so why worry about having a point guard on the floor? Put Anthony Leal in there.
Speaking of Jerome Hunter, that kind of answers a question about that. 2 games and he's back. So he came in and actually hits a fadeaway 3, which is probably not the shot they were looking for, but it doesn't matter because it went in. It was a gigantic shot at the time. How big is that for him, for what he's coming out of right now?
Well, I mean, it should be huge. I mean, he came in, made 2 big free throws. He's 2 for 9 on the year going into those 2 free throws, and Indiana had to have them. So that was a gigantic moment, I think, for him. But, I think he gives this team a little bit different look than anybody else on the floor is capable of doing. And I really, I've kind of said it all along. Last year, we kind of had that scenario with Devontae Green where you had to kind of live with some mistakes that he would make because he got going so fast, but he had the capability to put up big numbers.
He's going downhill at least.
Jerome's not quite to that level offensively, but he's close. He's as close as Indiana has to someone that can get hot and throw in shots like what we saw tonight.
And Steve comments, the guards had a great night tonight scoring, not attacking the basket a lot. It's not in what they're trying to accomplish, I guess, but would that not help open things up? But, of course, their spacing seems to be problematic.
And that's what I'm talking about, in that Rob Finney is not doing the things that a point guard would do. I'm not just saying he has to score a bunch of points. I mean, he had that one game, he had 18. Forget that. Like, they don't need that out of him. But they need some production. I mean, you look at his stat line the last game, what did we say? It was 0, 0, 0. You look at it tonight, it's 2 because he made 2 free throws in overtime. But it was 0, 0, 0. He's not getting rebounds. He's not getting assists. And, he's just not playing like a point guard. So what's the point in having that guy out there on that position? Everyone's going to fall back on, because Archie Miller says he's a great one-on-one defender. Well, I watch guys score right over the top of him all night long. So I don't want to hear that. They score over Armand Franklin. They score over Al Durham. They score. A good offensive player is going to score. You're not going to stop them. And our freshmen make mistakes defensively from a rotation standpoint, but they have the ability to score the ball, and that makes up for it to me.
Free throws, again, almost cost them this game because it's horrific.
It almost cost them the game and then turned around and kind of won them the game.
Unbelievably, they hit enough at the end. Northwestern couldn't get to the line. I have to look to see where they ended up. At one point, they were 3 of 5.
They had,
so they ended up 8 of 12 for the night at the line. Indiana gets to the free throw line 38 times. They hit 27 of them, 70%. So they increased it at the end. But, man, it was bad early on. But they picked it up at the end. Still need to hit more shots. I mean, there's a lot of games that can be won and lost at the free throw line for this team.
Yeah, I mean, they won. So let's be excited. We'll try to keep it on the positive level. But it should never have been that close. I mean, they missed 10 free throws in the early part, in regulation play that, it changes the whole outcome of the game. And the game truly would have been different if it hadn't have been for all those missed free throws. Like, Indiana would have been a little bit more in control. But Free throw shooting, I have no excuse for. Like, I can't make excuses for them. I don't understand how they could be this bad of a free throw shooting team. It's embarrassing. It's not Indiana basketball. It's not what, when we all choose to root for Indiana, we choose because they've played a certain way over the years, and that's kind of why we root for them and why we're fans of them. And this team doesn't play that way. And quite frankly, like I said it in the last game, this team's not fun to watch. Like, they're not very fun to watch. Even winning against Iowa, they weren't very fun to watch. This game tonight, definitely not very fun to watch. But if they make the NCAA tournament, I will sure have fun watching the NCAA tournament games.
Well, and winning this game is a step in that direction. If they lost this game, they were out.
Dunzo.
They were off the board.
Dunzo, yep.
No doubt. So, but now it gets difficult. Now you got to go on the road Saturday and take on a team that you beat, but a team that's on the rise. Ohio State, number 4 in the country now. They are playing at a really high level, and Chris Holzman has them playing really, really well, and it's at home. And they had some days off to rest.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing as well as anyone. I think a lot of people would, especially offensively, they are playing as well as anybody in the conference. And, it'll be a tough game. This is the kind of game that Indiana needs to make it look just like the game tonight. It needs to be ugly, because if it's a good offensive output, Indiana's going to be on the bad side of that. Like, this needs to be Indiana's best defensive game of the year coming up, because Ohio State is different than your normal Ohio State team. They've got the ability to score the ball this year.
Well, I'm afraid to put this one up here. There's just too much to read there, but we'll get through it as we go. Let's talk about being up and down. But, yeah, and they have been. Tonight is another monkey off of Archie's back. Indiana had been 2-9 in games after beating a top 25 team. Damn near came close to doing it again, but they get the win. So now they're 3-9 after beating top 25.
Yeah, still, that still sounds terrible.
It is. I don't really think it has anything to do with beating a top 25 team. They're not winning games in multiple succession anyway.
That's exactly right. That's the overall key. Like, I've seen that.
It doesn't matter.
That is so irrelevant. First of all, it doesn't factor in. Are they playing another top 25 team after that, or are they playing it? If you said they're 2-9 against teams that have a less than 500 record over the years, I'd be like, okay, well, that's a more meaningful stat. That tells you something right there. But one of the things I will say with this, Jim, and I've thought about it a lot, and I know you've heard former Indiana players and for the most part, former Bob Knight players talk about, we practiced and we discussed more. Coach Knight always talked about the mental aspect of the game. And we discussed more about how to handle situations when we were winning than we did when we were losing. And obviously, a lot of that had to do with we won a lot, and we were on a lot of winning streaks. But they talked to us a lot about how to handle success and how to handle, teams coming at you with their best effort and teams wanting to beat you. And we talked a lot about that. So that's something that I think,
what are some of those things, keys that this team could do that they're not doing?
Not get on Twitter, not as soon as the game's over, not sit on there and go anything about how much of a big shot you just hit. Like, I know I'm so tired of people saying, hey, they're just kids and all that. It's a different era. We didn't have email when I was in school. Now we've got Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and crap. Like, I get it. I know it's a different era. But if you're going to do that stuff, then you better expect the negative stuff when you don't make the big shot. You better win. That's exactly right. You keep winning, you can talk all the trash you want. You can Twittersphere the world to death. Like, it doesn't matter. You can if you can back it up, you can talk all the trash you want to talk. But don't all of a sudden go hiding behind I'm a kid when you don't back it up. And that's why to me, it doesn't make any sense. I would stay away from, pounding my chest or sticking my chest out when we win a game and do something good, unless we're sitting in a situation like Michigan or somebody like that, where we're 8-1 in the league, or we've got a reason to talk some trash. These guys right now they just beat a horrible Northwestern team. And just mark my words, somebody on Twitter, some of these players on Twitter will be on there talking about, another W or whatever it's going to be, instead of just shutting up and focusing on the next game. And that drives me insane.
Does it show just a lack of focus, team focus on what you're doing?
That's individual to me. That's totally individual. I don't even care if you're pumping up, if Al Durham's pumping up Armand Franklin made a big shot or whatever. Like, focus on the next game. Focus on what's in front of you. Not like
that's why you tune in, baby.
Indiana's going to support this team. Like, the fans, like, that's our job to bitch and complain and talk trash and enjoy all the, everything that goes along with it. The players' job, like, they're there, they get free education and they get to run out there on that court, and their job is to go win games, not to talk about how good they played or, retweet a shot that they made or whatever. Like, or and I'm just going to say it, Jim, or to hold a press conference at halftime of the Super Bowl to announce that I'm coming there to play. Like, that's not Indiana. And so I don't want somebody to say, like, I know the history of Indiana and that's why I chose to go there. Well, you didn't. If you held a press conference at halftime of the Super Bowl, that's as individual as it gets.
Well, I was definitely part of that, so I can't say too much about that. But yeah, it's definitely a different time. We're both from a different era, and it's different, but the winning's not there. So when the winning's not there, it's easier to say, hey, man, maybe you should step back and look at some things. But they got to get this thing together. They still have a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. You have to win. But now you've got to beat teams that are way, way better than what you played tonight. And if you play an Ohio State, a Michigan like you did tonight, they're going to lose by 30. And I don't want to see that, of course, but they have got to do something offensively. These teams are scouting them out and are just stopping them easily with a defensive scouting. I mean, we heard the Purdue players call it out, saying we knew what they were going to do. We scouted them, and they did. And something's got to be different.
Here's the thing, Jim, and here's what's funny. And so I'll Bill Walton it to death on here, and I'll say, with Coach Knight, we ran the motion offense. We didn't put in new plays. We didn't put in new sets. We didn't put in anything else. We ran the same offense that Quinn Buckner ran and that Isaiah ran and Randy Whitman and Dockich and Alford and we ran the same offense. Every single team knew what we were going to do every single game that we played. It's called execution. It's a matter of how well you do it. And Purdue could call out all the plays they want to call out. Indiana should run down the floor and say, I'm going to run a ball screen right here with Trace Jackson Davis going to come up here and set it. I'm just going to run it well enough. You can't stop it.
Larry Bird.
And that's truly the mentality that you've got to get to. It's not a secret. It doesn't need to be we're going to trick them into something, because if you're trying to trick them, that's hit or miss. That's helter skelter. Like you're trying to luck yourself into a win. I want to execute to the point where I want to say, hey, this is what we're running. I'm not putting anything different for this game. We're running the same stuff we ran the last game. You watch it on film, just come out there and try to stop it. And that's where I think this team is lacking a little bit in their confidence level offensively. I'm not sure that Archie's confident in them.
Is he confident in himself offensively? I really seriously, because we look at this and we've talked about it on, and everybody does. It's all over everywhere. No one has any clue what is going on offensively, and it's just an offensive mess out there, and there's no signs of changing. I mean, people talk about changing lineups. That's not going to happen. There are not going to be any lineup changes. It hasn't happened in 3.5 years. Why do you think it's going to happen now? It's not going to. But
yeah, I mean, Mike's comment there about changing. I mean, yeah, I've said please on Twitter twice, Mike, and it doesn't work. Like they don't listen to me. Being polite doesn't help and doesn't work. So that's not going to happen. And it's just, it's that definition of insanity. Like we keep expecting a different result, and it's not. Like we're insane to think that lineup is going to change. And so
at halftime today, I knew it wasn't going to. Somebody posted it, and I'm like, I got $100 that says it does not change.
I wasn't even going to waste my thumb energy on sending another Twitter out, because it just, it's just not going to happen. So let's just move on from that topic onto this team offensively. I don't agree with the statement, and I know that's not really what you're saying, but I don't agree with the statement of nobody knows what's going on. I think that I think they understand what it is they're told to do. I don't necessarily think that they understand why they're told to do it, why they're doing certain things. And that's when you saw Indiana teams of the past, and we're all Indiana fans because we watched Indiana over the years. So I'm allowed to refer back to teams. It's not just Coach Knight's teams. I mean, you could watch Jordan Holes and watch those guys. Like, you could kind of tell they believed, they bought in, they knew what their offense was and what they were trying to accomplish. And I'll be honest with you, I guess you could probably say they're trying to get Trace Jackson Davis as many touches as possible. But outside of that, if I made these guys sit down and write down a list offensively of what their goals are going into a game, I'm not sure we would get everybody writing the same thing down on a piece of paper.
Christian Lander, as Bradley points out, with Lander not playing for passes, playing for points, he does get the ball moving. But something I want to ask about Christian, and I am the last person to talk about shooting. You're a great shooter. His shot mechanics. He gets twisted on his shot once he releases.
He starts it out too low. He shoots like I'm going to say this, and I probably shouldn't because I've never even had a conversation with him or his family or anybody, but he shoots like somebody that's never had a professional shooting coach show him the mechanics and how he should shoot. He starts the ball down way too low, and you're right. Like, his shoulders is the only really way to explain this is at some point his shoulders are not squared to the basket. Like, they angle big time, a lot. And he there's a lot of little tiny things that he could do different. And that's where, I think we see a lot of different Indiana fans mention, this team needs a shooting coach, and they do. I mean, everyone who's a big time Indiana fan and followed them for years back into the 70s would probably find it hard to believe. Dan Dakich was not known as a great shooter, but Dan Dakich was really a great teacher of how to shoot, and he helped be responsible for a lot of the different guys during my time that played that were good shooters, and he gets a lot of credit for that. Just because you weren't great at it doesn't mean you're not good at teaching it, and
just because you're great at something does not mean you can teach it.
Doesn't mean you can do it. It doesn't mean you could show it to somebody else how to do it right, and that's a fact, and that's why every great player is not a great coach. And this team needs somebody to mechanically show them some fundamental things that they do wrong that could help them. Christian Lander, this is probably part of not being able to be there in the summertime, not being able to have the coaching, because they definitely, there's some little things he could do to improve and make it a lot easier and consistent for himself.
And he's young. This is what it's time to learn. I mean, he's a year younger. He should be in high school still. So he's plenty of learning ahead of him.
Yeah, but I mean, I think probably part of my frustration and aggravation, along with other Indiana fans, is that's an easy excuse when you're a freshman. But now Rob Finney's a junior, and he's still not a very good shooter from a percentage standpoint. And, these guys are not improving over the years from a putting the ball in the basket standpoint. Now, everyone's going to fall back on Armand Franklin averages so many more points than what he averaged last year. Yeah, well, he plays so many more minutes than he played last year too. Like, Armand is playing terrific. That is no knock on Armand. But that's a goofy stat that doesn't really mean a whole lot because it's just, it's kind of meaningless. But these guys are not improving offensively. I would challenge you to tell me, take Armand Franklin. I'll even say you can have Al Durham. I'll say Al Durham's a better offensive player than he was last year. Race Thompson is the same player he was last year. He just didn't play any minutes. He's not that dramatically better offensively than he was last year. Every other player on the team is worse. Statistically, from a visual standpoint of watching them, like, they're worse offensively than they were last year.
And the freshmen, as they continue to move up, that's putting more pressure on people like Rob Finney. As a junior,
you would think that, but it doesn't.
You would hope. Well, you would hope
I mean, we would think that. Like you would think at some point, the lack of production is going to put him on the bench, but it doesn't. It never does.
And the questions continue to come, and I know with Trayce Jackson-Davis and the NBA, and it's not about people seriously ready. It's about physical ability and potential that you talk about all the time. But when he continues to not perform, his motor is something that is the NBA going to question his motor? He doesn't come out playing from the tip to the end of the games, and that's something that they notice.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the biggest difficulties with Trayce is he doesn't really have an offensive go-to. Like his go-to is get to that left hand, turn to that right shoulder, get anything going to that left hand. But I can't even really say, if they throw the ball into him on the left-hand block, it's a bucket. Or they throw it into him inside, he catches it just inside the free throw line. It's a bucket. He's scoring. You can't really say that about Trayce. Trayce is a crazy, gifted, strong athlete. He's a strong jumper. He's a quick jumper. He's aggressive when he jumps and goes after the ball. He's probably the best two-hand rebounder in all of basketball, in all of college basketball. And I firmly believe that. Doesn't mean he's the best rebounder, but he's the best two-handed rebounder, which does mean something to the NBA. And there's not a whole lot of guys who you'll put in that category. There's not very many two-handed rebounders at all. And so he has some different qualities than the average guy. What was Romeo so good at? Romeo wasn't a great shooter. Romeo wasn't a great slasher and all that. Romeo was good at finishing at the rim. Romeo was one of the best finishers at the rim of everyone in college basketball. And that's for a guy who was 6'5" or 6" or whatever it was. I mean, he wasn't crazy athletic. He just was so good at finishing at the rim. And that's why the NBA knew he was going to, at some point, be a good player. And I think Trayce kind of falls into that category. The difference is going to be, how deep is the draft, and at what point is somebody going to be willing to take a flyer on Trayce Jackson-Davis? Because he's not a guaranteed home run in the NBA. And Romeo has struggled in the NBA. And I think he was much more of a sure thing from an NBA perspective than Trayce Jackson-Davis is.
Do a quick reset, and then I got another question to come back. Of course, we're coming to you live from Yogi's. You see, even on this snowy, cold night, people are out and about here at Yogi's, man, joining us. So it's very cool to be here tonight. But it is cold and snowy out there, though, so be careful. You made a comparison a while back, and Forrest is asking about you compared TJD to Karl Malone, and I'm saying this is a young Karl Malone, not the 18-year veteran Karl Malone. Explain the similarities between them.
First of all, physically they're pretty similar. Like they're square-shouldered, they're big, strong, square-shouldered. They both you put the ball in the hand. You can remember Karl Malone back in the days when he would square his guy up. I mean, he'd have the ball right in front of you, and you could smack it, and you weren't getting it away from him. And Trayce is a lot like that. Now, we remember Karl Malone for the last 10 or 12 years of his career when he was able to make that 17-foot jump shot at regularity, and he knocked down that thing off the backboard all the time, and that's the one we remember. But he didn't have that shot all the time, and they developed that for him in the NBA, and he got with the right person, and he was able to develop that jump shot. And I think Trayce probably has that capability. Why it's not developed quicker right now, I can't say. I don't get to see the ins and outs of what they do in the summertime and that stuff. But it's not developed as quickly as you would like for it to. But I think there's a lot of visual similarities between those two guys, and I think that's a huge compliment for Trayce Jackson-Davis.
Absolutely. Trey Galloway, man, again, we keep talking about him, just not improving.
No production. Until he gets on the floor and becomes confident in his offensive abilities. I think his minutes will continue to go down. Look, hey, remember this. The exact same thing happened last year with Armaan Franklin. You remember Armaan started the year out. He started every game. He was playing tons of minutes. And then as his production didn't increase and it started to go down, his playing time went down. There was games at the end of the year where Armaan barely played, if at all. And I think Trey's kind of falling into that same category right now.
I agree. And gosh, I forgot what I was going to say next. Tag on. I had a point that I was going to bring up. Nope, I forgot again. So bring up something because my mind went blank. I'm trying to think up. I had a point that I was going to make.
Well,
I know exactly what it was. That's why it's such a big one, because I don't want to put this onus on you. I sent a tweet out during the game that said, Indiana offensively does not look cohesive. They don't look. Their execution is horrible, and just I forget what else I said. I said basically, it looks like offensively, Archie's. I said inept. Defensively, he knows the defensive coach, but offensively, they're inept. That what we saw today is ineptness. This is 3.5 years in, and there's no way you can not talk about that stuff now. It's just getting to the point that it's ridiculous when it's game in, game out, and you're struggling to beat a team that hadn't won in 9 games.
Yeah, and like I look at it from this perspective is, this team. We're Indiana fans, okay? Like I straight up admit it. Like you work in the media, you kind of have to be in the middle of the road. But
I try to be in a minute, but in my heart, I'm an IU. I'm an IU fan, but I try to.
We're Indiana fans. I want Indiana to do good. I want them to play well. I want to watch them because of what they've been over the years and what I expect to see out of this team. And Jim, this team isn't it. Like, this team is boring. This team is not fun to watch. And here's what'll happen. We'll see some of these players' parents, and they'll be on Twitter, and they'll be saying all these things about great win. We did all this. Look how exciting this was and all that, because it's their kid. I can go watch Carmel play, and I'm excited about it because Will's playing in the game. But everybody else watches Carmel, and they're like, this is boring. Like, who wants to watch this? But I enjoy it because it's my son playing.
And they're winning, man. And number one in the state, right? Are they still number one, by the way? Let's throw it out there.
They had a loss and moved it up to number one.
I know.
But I mean, this team's not fun to watch. Like, I would struggle for anyone to tell me what excites them about, like generally on a game day. I can remember this from years ago. Remember the Jordan Holes years, the Victor Oladipo years. All that, like, I can remember thinking how excited it was when it was game day. Like I couldn't wait to watch the game tonight. The game was on at 5:30 or whatever. Jim, I was scared to death of this game. I was scared to death we were going to lose to Northwestern, who's awful. And I know Northwestern went through a period early in the season where they played really good basketball, okay? But let's call it what it is right now. They're terrible. Like, they're awful. And almost what happened is exactly what I was afraid of all day long. So it's just not – I'm not excited about watching this team. They are with a lot of teams you can identify as a fan. I think you would get a lot of people that would agree with this statement, and they don't even have to be from Indiana. And I'm not even saying Indiana like IU. I'm saying the state of Indiana is basketball fans get to watch good basketball from the time their kid plays when they're in the first grade all the way through high school. There's great high school coaches. Purdue's good, Butler's good, Indiana's good, Indiana State's good, Notre Dame's good. There's a lot of good basketball to watch. So you get to see it, and you can recognize certain things that's fun to watch. There's reasons why you watch certain teams, and you enjoy watching good basketball. Indiana fans can't watch a game right here and recognize, oh, yeah, they're moving the ball really well. Such a race is screening great tonight. Like, you can't recognize anything good out there. But what do I say? But our weave looks good tonight. Like, we're wasting less time than normal. Like, it's not fun. It's not exciting. We had to go to double overtime to score 70 points in a game. That's not fun. That's not exciting. I want to watch Iowa, who averages 86 points a game. Like, that's what I want to watch. That's fun to me.
Yeah, earlier I said that Indiana had beaten Ohio State earlier this year because I heard them say I didn't think that we had played them either, but I just heard them say that, and I'm like, I guess I forgot. But Dalton said that Ohio State.
Yeah, they said we beat them already.
I was like, I forgot. I'm like, I don't remember them playing them, but I was like, whatever. So they have not played them
Twilight Zone at some point in time. I missed some games this year.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, but as they move on, that is the next team up, man. And they are, like we said earlier, they are playing tough. All right, this Indiana team, does that win give them confidence? What do they get from beating a team that played that poorly and going in to play a team at Ohio State on Saturday?
Yeah, here's here's what you've got to do as a player. Okay, you've got to have a real short memory when it comes to wins and losses and makes and misses and all that stuff. So you know what you do? You chalk this up to it's a win. It's a W. That is exactly what we do. Let the coaches deal with the whole what we did wrong and watching it on film. I'm sure there'll be plenty of game film for them to watch and see things they can work on. But Jim, tomorrow's Thursday and they play on Saturday. If they watch this film at all, it's going to be a little bit, and then they're moving on to figure out what they've got to do to beat Ohio State. So you know what? And that's Bob Knight, Archie Miller, Tom Izzo. It doesn't like from that scenario. You've got to move on as soon as that game's over. You got to move on. It was a W. Indiana has to look great from that perspective and move on. Like, let's go figure out how we beat Ohio State. And that's not going to be easy. This is an Ohio State team that's playing as well as anybody except for maybe Michigan.
Is that stat right? They were 15 of 16 at the free throw line in overtime?
Probably,
Indiana?
because how else could they get to 70%? They were 8 for 18 at one point.
Yeah, it was horrible. But crunch time to shoot free throws as poorly as they do, and to hit them like that in crunch time, that's a big positive to take away.
Thankfully, Al got to the free throw line a bunch. I mean, he's the guy that Indiana can kind of rely on consistently. I mean, he's got 4 years in. He's a mid-70s to 80% free throw shooter. So, I mean, thankfully they got the ball to him. They got him in position to be at the line. But, this team is, like I said, a part of why it's frustrating to watch is because, Jim, how many listeners do you think we have right here that on their own could shoot 75% from the free throw line? A lot.
I say it all the time that I think right now I could shoot 70%. And I'm not joking. I think that I could shoot 70%.
I'm telling you, I could shoot 75% left-handed. I could shoot over 70% blindfolded. Guaranteed fact. So it's practice. It's just a matter of, part of it is good hand-eye coordination and all that. But hey, at the end of the day, if you put the work in and you're confident in yourself, we talk about how important confidence is all the time. I mean, look at putters in golf. I mean, these guys are the best in the world, and they're only making 30% of their putts. And so, when they get confident, when they get hot, is when they get confident. And, I mean, they start making tons of putts when they get confident. And so that's the way Indiana has to be that's the way anybody has to be from a free throw shooting perspective. If you shoot enough of them in practice, and whether that means look, Archie Miller's not going to break practice down, and I don't expect him to, and I don't want him to. I don't want him to stop practice, and all of a sudden we're shooting 1,000 free throws in practice today. These guys, after practice is over, instead of going to eat dinner wherever they're going to eat, need to shoot 1,000 free throws every single night, maybe 4 times a night. Because that's what I would do. That's what if I was a good leader on this team. I hear on your show all the time, I hear Don Fisher talk about the alpha dog. If I was the alpha dog on this team, as Trace Jackson Davis tried to leave the gym, I would grab his keys and throw him in the whirlpool and not let him get them until he went out and shot 1,000 free throws. Like, I mean, the alpha dog's not the guy who's going to sit on there and go scream and yell at everybody or whatever. This guy's going to go, hey, Tracy, you're shooting 64% from the free throw line, and you get there a lot. You think maybe we ought to put in some extra work? And it's not like you're trying to guilt him into it. You go, hey, come on, let's go out and shoot free throws. And you rebound for him for 2 hours every day. Not once, not twice a week, every day.
Jordan Geronimo, I love seeing him, and I love seeing him with Christian Lander. Those guys just seem to gel together. Not just those two, but the freshmen. They've got a connection, a bond.
They do. They play better. They play better together, probably because they play on the practice squad team together all the time. So you're definitely going to develop some type of relationship and play better and understand where guys are. I mean, when you look at some of the passes that he makes, I mean, Christian Lander makes the highlight reel passes. I mean, he also makes some bad mistakes. But I mean, at some point, you got to just let him go. I really think you got to let him go. Like, you got to let him play. And then Jordan Geronimo, for a guy who's played as few minutes as he's played, I think you got to feel pretty darn good about where he stands right now. He's going to be a good contributor for 4 years at Indiana.
You mentioned this earlier, the social media thing. Why in the hell do they just not ban it? Actually, the team should get together and say, guys, we got to focus on winning. Let's shut it down and focus on what we're doing. This should be a team thing. They shouldn't be told by a coach. Somebody leader on that team.
But Jim, that's what an alpha dog does. I mean, when Don Fisher says that, I laugh all the time because I think people think that means you got to get in somebody's face and scream and yell at them and go crazy. That's not what it means at all. I mean, our alpha dog for 4 years was Calbert Chaney, and nobody spoke less than Calbert Chaney. I mean, he didn't talk at all, but everybody followed him, and everybody knew when we needed something, we knew where it was coming from. And yeah, I mean, Alan, you say that with words I'm not allowed to use on here, but that's exactly right. I mean, shut it down. Like you don't need Indiana fans love Armand. Indiana fans are going to love you for making that shot. You don't need to go post the video.
Or is it on us to get into a different era? I don't know. I mean, I'm not.
That's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. We can't control that part of it. But as an Indiana coach, I can control it. But here's the problem with that, Jim. If Michigan State doesn't control it and they let their players go haywire on Twitter, then it becomes a recruiting battle. And kids are like, well, I don't want to go to Indiana because they restrict you from all the stuff that you're allowed to do. They're hurting my marketability and all that bullshit. Like it should stop. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be a thing.
At the end of the day, they grind a win out, a win that they desperately need.
Back-to-back games.
Heading into Ohio State.
We haven't been able to say that very often.
Got to take this win. You're going to get back not as late as it would have been. But you've got tomorrow, and then you're off again because you've got to travel a day before to Columbus, and so they don't have a lot of time to turn around. They've got to be ready to play and shoot a lot better than they did today. Yeah,
I mean they're going into a gym that is going to be very similar to if they are able to make the NCAA tournament. Or at least it's going to be like the gym they're going to play in if they play in the Big Ten tournament. Ohio State's arena is a lot like Lucas Oil Stadium. It's a lot like the Bull Stadium. I forget the name of it up there, but it's a lot like that. So
United Center.
This is a good gym to go in and get your feet wet. Now, Indiana has shot the ball pretty well in Lucas Oil Stadium. Or not, I keep saying Lucas Oil, Bankers Life. They've shot the ball well in Bankers Life, and this is a similar type arena. So I like their chances at least being having an opportunity to go in there and shoot well.
And this Northwestern team beat Ohio State. They did beat Ohio State.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything though, because that was at a time of the year when they were super hot, like they were playing great. They had all the confidence in the world. I think you could watch them play tonight and realize they have no confidence. They don't think they could beat anybody right now, and they're right. Like, I know they gave a stat like they've been so close in all these different games. Yeah, well, they're not as close as the points look. Like, I've watched a lot of those games. They didn't have that chance.
Well, we'll certainly find out on Saturday. Hopefully they can come up with a third win in a row. If they can get a win against Ohio State, I'm not going to say that seals the NCAA tournament, but if you add the two
They'd have to lose out. They'd have to lose out in order to not make the tournament if they can beat Ohio State.
Yeah, so the win today, very important. You get one more, especially over Ohio State, and they're in great shape. We'll find out. Of course,
and Jim, they're playing with nothing to lose. That's kind of the good part of it. I mean, they should go out there. This is a game tonight you can't lose. Like, you can't lose this game to Northwestern. There's a lot of pressure on Indiana. There's way more pressure on Indiana to win this game tonight than there was Northwestern. That's not the case Saturday. Nobody's going to expect Indiana to win. So you're freewheeling it out there on Saturday.
Absolutely. We'll be back right after the game on Saturday, after the game with Todd Leary, of course, coming to you as soon as the game is over. Not sure if we're going to be at Yogi's, where we're going to be Saturday coming up. But also we'll be back on the radio tomorrow, so tune in for that. But Indiana gets the win tonight over Northwestern in 2 overtimes. So hopefully they can get a third one on Saturday. Todd Leary, I hope Trey, safe travels wherever you are right now. Keep the wheels up.
No, man, it was a battle. I needed double overtime just to get here, just to get able to be on the show. But the weather's awful, so if you're out traveling right now in Indiana,
everybody, Be safe. Thanks a lot to everybody at Yogi's, of course, Finney Hospitality, Nathan Finney, Chris Martin, Kelly, everybody here at the Yogi's. Be safe tonight. It is pretty bad out there, so if you're out and about, make sure you're still wearing your mask. Do something nice for somebody. Until tomorrow morning, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see for Todd Leary. I will see you on the radio.